You. I'm happy to be here.
For those of you that don't know Todd, Todd has been a customer of Aquatic Adventures for a long time, and is also a dive master with us on staff. And we're really lucky to have Todd as a part of that team. I think, Todd, you bring a very um, very even keeled demeanor, and that you're really particular about gear, making sure that people do things right. And obviously, that's something in diving that is very important. What I know about you, I think we've got a chance to interact more this year than ever before. And
Sure.
our recent trip to Tobermory really demonstrated how much you like freshwater diving, how much you like diving in the Great Lakes, how much you like diving on shipwrecks. And, it was because of you that I really was fascinated in going on this trip. And I learned a lot about what was happening in Tobermory and Lake Huron from you on that trip. So we appreciated you having you on that trip, and certainly your contributions while we were there. So thanks for joining us on that.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you. So,
Um, we had set up a meeting in April for the dive club, and it was to go over MAST. And Aquatic Adventures and MAST have had a relationship for some time, going back to Patrick and Landon, and now you've kind of taken the lead on that. And one of the dive club meetings was going to be at the pool, really going through what is MAST, and a lot of you might be asking that question, and I will let Todd answer it very soon. But obviously, as we all know right now, uh, we can't get in the pools. We're looking forward to doing that very, very soon, and we hope to have Todd, you give the presentation and teach people what they can learn and how they can contribute to MAST. And maybe we can get that one on the books a little later in the year. But for now, let's talk about yourself a little bit. I mean, you've dove a
okay.
lot in the Great Lakes, and you have a lot of experiences to share. And then we'll get into a little bit of MAST.
Yeah, I mean, well, MAST, or Maritime Archaeological Survey Team, is the long name, really introduced me to shipwrecks in the Great Lakes, uh, and I've just fallen in love with shipwreck diving in the Great Lakes. It's been absolutely fantastic. Um, I think people underestimate how good shape a lot of the wrecks are in. I mean, fresh water, fresh cold water, certainly some of the deeper wrecks. You have some wrecks hundreds of years old, well, not hundreds of years, but a couple 100 years old or so, that are just in great shape, really well preserved, and they're just something else to see. Um, and that's really piqued my interest, and I've just gotten addicted, and I can't get enough. So
Yeah, certainly, and the dives in Tobermory, and I had never really dove in the Great Lakes until that time, so it was a great introduction for me. Um, I can think of the James King, I can think
yeah,
of the Niagara, I can think of the Sweepstakes. All of these wrecks, they were slightly different. One steel, two wooden, but the wooden ships, if I remember right, maybe late 1800s
yeah,
is when some of these ships went down, and the shape that they're in, um, I was in awe of, as well as the craftsmanship and what was happening with them at the time that they sank. So, if you haven't been to Tobermory, or you want to know a lot about that area, I would really recommend looking into it because it's pretty fascinating, and certainly I think drives your interest and your involvement with MAST, I'm
sure.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, every time I go on one of these dives, you learn something. You hear about, well, they say it had lost power, but then you look, the prop is busted, and so everybody says, oh yes, that means it was under power when it hit the rocks and things like that. So you always learn these very interesting backstories, and I mean that is really, I got a lot of that through MAST, got introduced to it. And I mean, it's every time you dive one of these wrecks, it's just a whole lot of history coming at you. to be honest with you.
And I think the neat thing about this is for us is that a lot of it's in our own backyard. So
Yeah,
it is somewhat accessible. We're not looking at uh, flights around the world. We're looking at, 6-hour drive to some really great destinations.
sure.
And I know you've done a lot of that. And MAST is probably a little bit closer to us to some of the work that you guys are doing versus Tobermory.
Yeah.
Where's some of that work being done?
Almost all of the mass work is being done on in Lake Erie. So on the shores and out in Lake Erie, but most of the work is being done out of Cleveland, Sandusky, those areas. I mean, so for us in Central Ohio, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
It's very conveniently located for that.
So for everybody out there that's kind of asking that question, what is MAST? I think you said it earlier, but give us a little bit of background about the history and
Sure.
what you do.
Sure. So MAST, well, their mission, I'll start off with their mission. I mean, their mission is to document, to study and provide education around underwater archaeological resources. So basically our cultural heritage underwater. Probably the simplest way to put it is they're preserving Great Lakes shipwrecks one at a time. I mean, that's really what they do. A little bit about how they got started. So some time ago, mid 80s, a fellow named Richard Wright and Dan Orr. Dan's from Wright State. Richard Wright was from BGSU. And they kind of started doing archaeological work, on the Great Lakes. Not too long after that, the state of Ohio passed their shipwreck law. And what all that basically does, without getting into detail, is say, hey, you cannot take things from wrecks. You basically can't loot wrecks.
Right.
Can't just take whatever you want. So it provides, some protection for those wrecks, gives the Ohio History Connection and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources the responsibility for managing them. That's one of the big things that it does. So after that, there was a collection of various groups. I mentioned Bowling Green. You've got other groups like Cleveland Underwater Explorers, National Museum of the Great Lakes, Ohio Council of Skin and Scuba Divers, Department of Natural Resources, all these groups working together. They created this Submerged Lands Advisory Council. I think that was mid-90s to the mid-2000s timeframe. But basically, they started, taking up that mission of studying and documenting, generating reports about these wrecks, and identifying where they're located. And then out of that, that's when MAST started to take form. And MAST has brought a bunch of other things, which I'll talk a little bit more about, like buoys and whatnot. And so, they've added to the overall mission. They're also providing other, benefits, making wrecks a little bit more accessible to people. So people who have boats can go out, dive these wrecks here in the Great Lakes. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how they came to be.
I think that finding them is one thing. Having them accessible is important.
Yes.
Knowing where they fit in history. I'm sure that some of these wrecks, we might have known that they were missing or had sank, but they actually know where they are and verify that. And probably, I'm assuming there's probably a lot that may not have a lot of documentation around, and all of a sudden there is a discovery of a wreck that holds some kind of historical significance.
Yeah, I think the stats are, I'm looking over here. There's like 2,000 shipwrecks and accidents. There's about 800 to 1,000 left undiscovered. I mean, 350 or so have only been discovered. So, I mean, there's a lot out there. So there's a lot to be documented, a lot to be found. You talked about, or you mentioned about the accessibility. One of the things that MAST does is produce dive slates for some of the wrecks. So if you're a diver, you'll actually have an idea of, how to dive the site, how it's laid out, where things are at. So, that's good stuff. As a matter of fact, just the beginning of this winter, I think it was in February, we got together and I was doing like some of the plotting work, the inking as they call it, for one of the dive slates, for basically a layout of a wreck that would be put on a dive slate.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, obviously you've been involved for a while. You got started because you love it. How did you get started? What did you do? Obviously, and I think that you guys encourage people to be a part of this. So,
Yeah.
so talk us through that a little bit.
So, I myself, actually, with Landon at the shop, Landon Stiverson, he actually introduced me to MAST, and I took the course back in 2016 with him. We were dive buddies through the whole process, so to speak. But that's how I got started, and I did the basic course that year in 2016, and then did the field work, that summer. And
What
so
is
that
what did you get? What did you do in the course? So and this is, I'm
okay,
just thinking out loud here. So
sure.
if I wanted to get involved in this and I wanted to do some of the work that you're doing, I could volunteer for that work, and I have to go through a class in order to be certified to go with you and do the work, right? And to understand what I'm doing and how to do it. What are some of those things that you're learning during those sessions?
So first, it starts off with an introduction to nautical archaeology. What is it all about? What's involved? This includes law, all types of things, regulations. It covers quite a bit of ground. Actually, it's a great course. It's chock full of information. I'll say that.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Um, and then you talk about boats and parts and pieces and what their names are. I mean, I myself, I was familiar. I'd spend time around boats as a child, but yeah, I didn't know all the parts and things. I didn't know what these things were called. So you learn a lot of that. You also learn about the research methods. You learn, and specifically around trilateration, you learn how to take measurements on an archaeological site. I mean, that's really a big part of it. And actually, there's a dry run, associated with it when you take the actual class, and then there's, after the classroom portion that takes place at the National Museum of Great Lakes, you then go to White Star Quarry. They have an open water portion where you actually get to practice underwater, taking measurements. It's probably a little bit more challenging than people would think. I mean,
Sure.
consider you're neutrally buoyant and someone tugs on a tape measure you have. They're just pulling you through the water. It doesn't take much.
Right.
You have to learn a little bit of a new skill there to make it all work. But you get to do that practice. So that's really what you get to learn out of the course. It's actually a great course. Love it.
Yeah, and I think on top of using the tape, you've also got probably lower visibility conditions. And probably even some current. I mean, the lakes are, I think, more dynamic than people give them credit for.
They
Uh,
are.
so obviously, with any kind of certification or learning within diving, I think practice and education on the surface, and beneath the water is extremely important.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. There is current, and I remember the first time it was on a wreck, up in Sanilac. I mean, the current was just ripping that day, and it was something else. I was surprised. It's like, really, this is the Great Lakes.
So,
But
obviously, it's, I think, for those of us that dive, for those of us that dive locally, for those of us that enjoy the type of diving that's represented in your background there, cold water, Great Lakes. I've taken the class. I'm ready to go. And what do I do next? Are there certain things that I'm doing each year?
Oh,
How do I become involved? And after I've kind of taken my course and I've passed, and
yeah.
I'm ready to do some work.
So what they do is they send out every year after the classes, the students that year get first dibs, essentially, right of first refusal to go on the field work that coming year. And so basically that's usually a boat, sometimes it's shore. But you get invited to go on the trips and then you would do some of the field work. That's the first thing you would do. After that, and I did this the following year in 2017, I took the advanced course, which that is more around teaching you how to basically do your own trips, do your own archaeology, lead your own surveys, write your own reports. So that gets into not how to participate, but how to run the show, so to speak.
Right.
And then, uh, you know, once you take the advanced class, that's when I really just started getting more and more involved. I started helping out with like the open water weekends as part of the class. I started doing the buoys that year as well, helping out with the buoy deployments, which, I might as well talk a minute about the buoys, but, we maintain, I think we're at 11 now buoys on Lake Erie on the wrecks, so that people have a place to moor. When they get to the wreck, they can find the wrecks easy. So it just makes them more accessible. And every spring we put them out, and every fall we pull them back in, and do maintenance and things like that. It's amazing how much maintenance they actually do need. All that wave action really does
Yeah.
put some serious wear and tear on them. So, in the winter months we do the maintenance as well. But at any rate, so the buoys were one thing I did. And, just I'm starting to help out with like the board now, and that's just evolved over time as I've been doing more and more with MAST. That's just evolved. Actually was going to be helping teach this year at the classes that were coming this weekend, but are now canceled due to COVID. But I was really looking forward to that, kind of bummed about that.
Yeah, I think we were looking forward to that, and obviously I know you had put a lot of work and preparation into that, and I think I think there is a large group of people that would be interested in learning. I think that certainly as a diver, and I think most divers are this way. You have really an appreciation of history for whatever you're diving on, and, whether it's a coral reef or a wreck in the Bahamas, to the Maldives, to our own backyards, and there's a lot of wrecks here. And I think if you want to get involved, and you want to have some purpose to some of the diving that you're doing, and really you're sharing and being a part of recording
Yeah.
the history of what's happened in some of our Great Lakes. I think it's phenomenal work. I think it's work that can go unseen. We know that those numbers come from somewhere, and they're
Yeah.
from MAST and folks like you that are actually out spending your own time doing the dive and recording the history. And that's great. And so if people want to be a part of this, and how do you go about getting started? Is there somebody that we should contact?
Well, probably the easiest place is to go to ohiomast.org. That's their website. That's where they have the information about the training, how to sign up. That's where you can register for the classes, and things of that nature. They also have, that's where we have copies of the dive slates, locations of the buoys, if you want to know where the buoys are at. So pretty much all the information, our reports, pretty much everything that MAST produces can be found through there.
Great. And that's MAST, mast.org.
Ohio MAST, OHIOMAST.org.
All right. Right.
That's the best place.
I think there will be people interested, and we certainly want to help grow that community of people that are taking these classes, that are interested in history, that can support a regional, local group that's doing some good work. And if there's anything that Aquatic Adventures can do to help MAST, we're here. we look forward to getting a meeting scheduled and some pool work complete so we can get some people educated and a part of doing some of the work.
Yeah.
And certainly we really appreciate having you on board. I think I'm trying to think about how many open water classes that you helped with last year, but the help is tremendous. We love having you on the team and appreciate your attention to detail and obviously passing that knowledge along to the students that you support. So we appreciate that.
And I'm happy to be part of it. I like it too.
I'm trying to think of any other questions I have. I think, again, if people are interested, make sure you visit their website. It looks like Todd's got a few things here. So,
yeah, we've got we're on Facebook as well and Instagram. Ohio MAST is a way to find us on any of those. Twitter as well. So, I mean, you can find us there, post there if you have questions. That's a good way to get in touch with people. But yeah, I think for me, you talk about getting involved with all of this. And one of the huge benefits for me has been all the different people I've met. I mean, it's completely opened up the world of diving. It's also opened my eyes to just how much there is. I've learned so much being with MAST. You know, you talked about the history. It is just a great experience for me. And I just can't get enough most times. So
I think you keyed in on something that was really important. And if for those of you that are watching, we did an interview with Mark James recently, and you go on trips and you do the work but scuba always builds a great community. And I think it's a very like-minded set of people that are focused on some really good morals. I mean, safety, having a dive buddy, all of the things that scuba represents certainly helps us board or come up with some really interesting and neat friendships, people that you probably wouldn't have met otherwise. And it really, I mean, you and I are a great example, you know, knowing you and what you're passionate about. You know, there's similarities there. And I think that the scuba has definitely opened up those doors. And you're right. At the end of the day, you know, we all know each other. And in this case, we know a little bit more about our history.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Todd, thanks for joining us. If you guys have any questions, make sure you visit the MAST website and their Facebook page. And if you have any questions about MAST or you need any of the contact info, you're more than welcome to reach out to us at Aquatic Adventures Ohio, and we will help get you that information. And who knows, you may be diving with Todd at the end of the year. Good luck on getting the buoys out. I know that you guys are working hard, and
yes,
I think there's a solution hopefully in the future when this COVID dies down a little bit and you know, a little bit of normalcy we hope comes back, and we know that you'll get the buoys out. So
all right.
We trust you.
Yep.
Fingers crossed. All right.
Yes.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.